started. Just to let you know, hopefully when you register, you receive a raffle ticket. Some of the tickets have been drawn. So after this session or in between during lunch, please stop by the merch table and see if you won something. And if you didn't win something just yet, there will be more drawings throughout the day, so keep hold of those tickets. I'm going to be introducing our next speaker, Dwana Back-Lamberson. She serves on the board of Pet Friendly Services. She has spent her career in nonprofit and healthcare spaces. She is grant professional certified and currently works as a grant consultant at a small consulting firm. Although her professional experience to date has been in human services, she has a true passion for animal welfare. She shares her home with one husband and 3 cats.
Thank you so much. I understand that people in the back were having a little bit of difficulty hearing in the last session, so I'm just checking in. Folks in the back? Good? All right, awesome. Thanks for being here today. I want to give you fair warning. If you were here last year and attended the conference, this is the same presentation I did last year. Tammy, I'm looking at you. So you've been warned. This is essentially the same material that I covered last year, but if you weren't here last year, or if you feel like it's been a year, I really need a refresher, then you're in the right place. That's fine with me. So we're going to talk about grants today, and specifically we're going to talk about the 3 phases of grant seeking. First, we're going to review what your organization needs to have in place to be grant ready. Then we're going to spend a little time talking about how to find grant opportunities and how to determine if the opportunity is a good fit for your organization. As a reminder, or for your information if you didn't know, on the table there was a list of resources, and on there, about 2/3 of the way down, resources for shelters and rescues. I can't read. I can talk, but I can't read. There's a bullet point there for grants, and there is a link to resources where Pet Friendly Services has actually compiled a list of foundations that support animal welfare causes. So feel free to check that. And I think it's a Google Doc, so I think if you go to that, this resource page is also posted on the Pet Friendly website so that you can actually click the URL. So we're going to talk about finding out if your organization is grant ready. We're going to talk about doing your homework, and then the third part is we'll talk about how to write a winning proposal. But first, I'm going to just say a little bit about why I'm here and what brought me to this point in time where I am giving a presentation about grant readiness. I'm not here because I consider myself to be an expert. I do work in the field, and I have a few years of experience. There are a lot of people that know more about grant writing than I do. This guy's the reason I'm here. This is Murphy. So Murphy was a rescue. I adopted Murphy in 2014, and I just lost Murphy on March 4th of this year. If you look closely, I don't think it shows too well in this picture, but he's an ear-tipped boy. He was a rescue, and he was my first cat, so he kind of changed the course of my life. I didn't know much about cats before I got Murphy, and since I had him, I have had the cat distribution system has brought many more cats into my life. I have volunteered at a cat rescue, and I'm now on the board for Pet Friendly Services, and this guy was the one that turned me into the cat lady, so we have Murphy to thank for that. And because I have been involved in animal welfare now for a while, I've been where you are. I know how hard this work is. I know how much you struggle. I know how much you're underfunded. And if there's anything I can say today that will help you to help cats like Murphy, then that's why I'm here, and that's what I want to do. So first, I want to talk about what needs to be in place for your organization before you even begin to look for grants. So for most grants, your organization needs to be a registered nonprofit, and I assume most of you have taken that step, that you have an IRS employer identification number to be eligible. And then at minimum, you need to have a board of directors, and enough infrastructure in place that you can demonstrate that you have governing and bylaws and that kind of thing. Most grants require or ask about board contribution and expect to see that 100% of your board members contribute financially to your cause. So if you have board members that aren't contributing, that's a conversation probably to have. Large or small, the amount doesn't matter, but just for you to be able to say that you have 100% board contribution. Internal capacity, just looking at whether or not you have the ability to manage the program that you're proposing to do in your grant. So be sure you have the staff and the volunteers and the infrastructure in place to carry out what you say you're going to do. You need to have an annual operating budget that you can explain what your expenses are and categorize those, and that you can explain your revenue streams, from adoption fees or donations or whatever. That you have that in some form. It doesn't have to be fancy. And I skipped mission statement, didn't I? Let me talk about that a little bit. You all know what you do, but to be able to articulate that and to talk about what your mission is, specifically, what kinds of animals you rescue, what you're hoping to accomplish through the work that you're doing. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it needs to be something that you can articulate to a funder. And then I will end this part by saying a data management system. So again, it doesn't have to be anything really sophisticated, but be able to track intakes, track adoptions, track medications, illnesses, surgeries, that kind of thing. And I'm sure you're already all doing that, but have something that is formal enough that you can produce that data when someone asks you about it. All right. So once you've determined that your organization is grant ready, then it's time to start looking at potential funders. So finding a good fit between a nonprofit and a funder. I used to say this was a lot like dating and that you needed to find a good match. I've decided maybe job seeking is a more accurate analogy, but they both work. You need to find a good fit. So there are several types of funders. Private foundations, often these are family foundations, and you may be familiar with some of them. How many of you have already done grant seeking and or have been awarded grant monies? Oh, good. Come on up. No, I'm just kidding. You can co-present with me. So some of you might be familiar with the family foundations in Indiana that do support animal welfare, like Nina Mason Pulliam, Kenneth A. Scott. I'm sure there's some other ones that you can name that are family foundations. That's one source of funding. Community foundations. A lot of counties' community foundations do support animal welfare. There are corporate foundations. Of course, we partner with a lot of retail stores for our adoptions like PetSmart and Petco. Those have grant opportunities available there. There are other national corporate foundations like the Bissell Foundation, Rachel Ray Foundation, that kind of thing. And then the last category of potential funders is government funders. It's possible, but probably pretty unlikely that you would get money from a government source, but I think there are some instances where that happens. There are some funders that don't take unsolicited proposals. So, you may find some foundations that have an open application process and they have 2 or 3 grant cycles a year, they announce it, they have an online application that you fill out. There are other ones that fly under the radar. They may not even have a website, and they don't have an open application process. And those are the ones that you may need to do some relationship building with. So those might be instances where you send a letter of introduction, you say, here's who we are, here's what we do, I'd love to talk to you sometime. Let me know if you have any interest in meeting or talking on the phone so that we can describe what we do and see if we're a fit. So there are a lot of ways to find grants. I just told you about the easiest one. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can take advantage of the resource that Pet Friendly Services offers. But there are ways that you can do some research on your own. The simplest, obviously, is good old Google. I would imagine at this point AI could help with that too. You could probably ask ChatGPT and find some answers there as well. as simple as grants for animal rescues in Indiana. There are grant databases that are free, including some that are called Grant Gopher or Grant Watch. There's some other ones out there that are free. Foundation Directory Online, if you really want to geek out a little bit, Foundation Directory Online is a very comprehensive database, and this is where you can find family foundations that don't publicize what they do and don't have their own website, and it's really expensive to get a subscription, but you can go to the public library and use it for free, and it's pretty cool. Again, if you have the time and if you want to geek out a little bit to find those, uncover those hidden resources. And the Indianapolis Public Library specifically, and I imagine this exists elsewhere as well, they've got a series of nonprofit training classes and workshops that you can attend, and they're all free, and they're a great resource. And then the last option would be paid grant databases. I'm just going to go ahead and say I think most of you may not have the resources to do that, and if you use the other ones to your advantage, you probably don't need to subscribe to one, but they're available. So then once you find a funder, you need to determine whether or not it's a good fit. And again, my dating analogy, don't bother going on a date with somebody if you don't have anything in common. So first, you want to find out what kind of funding they offer. General operating support is great. That's kind of the unicorn of funders. If you can find somebody that would just say, here's money to keep doing what you're doing. Often, though, funders want to support a specific program. So it might be a TNR program, it might be a spay-neuter program, it might be an adoption program, it might be something for special populations like older adults or veterans or something along those lines. But really dig in and find out what it is that they're funding within the realm of animal welfare so that you can determine whether or not it's a fit. Look at the geography of where they fund. Indiana foundations are great. There are some funders that will fund things in Indiana even if they aren't located here, but don't waste your time or theirs if they haven't ever funded anything in this area. And then make sure you're in alignment with their mission and their values. If they have a website, that's the easiest way to find out more about what they do and why they do it and how they do it. If they don't have a website, you may have to do a little more investigating, but make sure you're in alignment. And then when I say don't chase dollars, what I mean by that is you need to make sure that you're in alignment with their mission and their values. You also need to make sure they're in alignment with yours. Don't change who you are in order to get their money, right? So if you have a mission that is very focused on a certain population, a certain breed, a certain medical need, that kind of thing, don't adapt or change what you're doing. Stay in your lane, do what you know you do best, and find funders that will support that rather than trying to change to adapt to a specific funder. So the ways to get answers to your questions here. One is to check their website if they have one. If they don't, there are some open source websites. One is called grantmakers.io, where you can look up a foundation and just see some really basic information about how long they've been around, how much they give, who they've given to previously. The 990s, which are tax forms that are required to be public record, will show you specifically who they've given money to in the past and how much they've given. And then the last way to find out is to talk directly with the program officer. So if you get the opportunity to get in touch with somebody, it's always, again, the personal touch is always the best. And so if you get the opportunity to talk with somebody, even if they just have a contact us form on their website, take advantage of that. Or if they have an email address that's just a general info at, just reach out that way initially and just introduce yourself and get the conversation started. So once you think that you found a funder that is a good fit for you, take a look at the details. Think about the deadline. If they have an open grant cycle with a deadline, make sure that that's realistic and that you've got time to do a good job on your application. And then, again, reaching out to somebody ahead of time, if that's an option, is the best way. So once you've answered those questions, then you're ready to make a yes or no decision about whether or not to proceed with your proposal. So the next part, we're going to talk about how you actually execute a grant proposal. So first, before you write a single word, be sure you have the big picture of what's required. Right, so you want to take a look at what the specific purpose of the grant opportunity is, who they're intending to be the recipients, how much it is, what the timeline is, what reporting requirements they have, because again, you have a data collection system in place, you're going to be ready and able to give them data when they ask for it. And then look at the specific guidelines of the application so that you understand what the word limits are, what the formatting is. Some of them are very specific even about what size font you use, how many words per response, that kind of thing. Find out how and what their mechanism is for submitting, whether it's an online portal, whether it's via email. There are a few that actually still require you to submit it via US mail. Make sure you allow extra time for that. And then take a look at what supporting documents you're going to need. So it's more than just filling out the application. They're going to require some supporting documents sometimes from you. That could include a list of your board members. It can include a copy of your annual operating budget, letters of support. Different applications require different things, so just be sure you take a look at that ahead of time so you have sufficient time to gather all of that together before you even start. Often when I'm saying these things, lessons I've learned the hard way. So these are the common sections of most grant proposals. They might call them by different names. Some of them be there and some of them not, but generally speaking, these are the sections that would be on a grant proposal. An executive summary, the organizational information, what most of them refer to as a statement of need, program details, goals and objectives, an evaluation plan, sustainability, and the budget and budget narrative. So we're going to talk about each of those in detail, but that's just kind of the high-level view of what most grant proposals are going to require. So sometimes, but not always, they'll have an executive summary section at the beginning, and it comes first, but it's usually the best thing to wait and write it last because it's really a snapshot of what you're going to say. It's a preview, like my opening slide, here's what we're going to talk about today. That's kind of what an executive summary is going to look like. So it's best to write everything else first and then come back and do that one last. Usually they want to know a little bit about your organization, so you're going to start by kind of just giving them, maybe not the whole in-depth story of, I was born in 1972 in Oklahoma, but just an overview of this is how we started, this is why we started. This was the need we saw in our community and how we thought we could fill it. A little bit of background information about where you operate, how large your organization is, how many staff or volunteers you have, and what is your mission and vision. So what is it specifically that you're doing? What's your vision for the future? And what would success look like for you, right? Success looks, for most of us, like every animal has a home. Euthanasia rates drop to 0. Those kinds of things are what they want to know about what specifically you're doing. And whether your focus is cats or dogs, if it's a specific breed, if you specialize in adults or pregnant animals or newborns or strays or animals with specific medical needs, and just things by the numbers. How many employees, how many volunteers, how many animals do you rescue annually, how many do you adopt out annually, what's your budget, those kinds of things. The statement of need is really how you set the stage for what you're proposing to do. So what's the problem? For most of us, the problem that we're trying to solve is pet overpopulation or pets that don't have homes. Euthanasia rates might be a problem. Mortality rates might be the problem. Shelter overcrowding might be the problem. But you want to be armed with data. We heard our previous speaker say that too. Know your community and know what the need is, and be able to say, this is the problem and this is what we're doing to be able to solve it. You may want to come at it from a different angle. You might want to talk about pet owners. What supports do pet owners need to be able to keep their animals safely at home? What does that look like? Does that look like affordable care? Does it look like behavioral advice so that they stay housed? What does the community at large need to help us all be better stewards of our animal friends? So whatever that need is what you're articulating, the statement of need. An important thing here is it's not what your organization needs. You don't want your statement of need to be, we really need new computers because it takes a long time for us and we're frustrated. If you need new computers, it could be, look how much faster our adoptions will happen if we've got good technology, and our customers will be so much happier, and we will therefore be able to serve more people and get more animals adopted quickly, right? So always make it about what you're doing for animals, what you're doing for the community, not necessarily what your organization specifically needs. So you've talked about the problem in your community, you've set the stage, so now you're going to talk about the solution, and you are the solution, right? We've all learned in school about the who, what, when, where, and why, right? Your statement of need is the why, but now you're going to dig into the details of how you're going to go about responding to the need. I encourage you to be creative. You know, if you have a unique idea that's going to grab their attention, or something specific that you're doing is a little bit different than how other people are approaching the need, then by all means, toot your own horn and talk about what your great idea is and why they need to support what you're doing, because you're a part of the solution. Funders want to look at what your outcomes and goals are going to be. They want to know, back to the job-seeking analogy, your grant proposal is essentially a resume, and you're saying, I'm the one to do the job, right? So funders, you're not asking for a handout when you approach a foundation for a grant. You're asking for a partnership, much like taking a job. The employer needs you as much as you need a job. And they're posting basically that they have an opening and they want to fill it. You're using your grant proposal as your argument for why you're the best fit for the job. Part of that is letting them know what they're going to get for their investment, and that's where your outcomes come in. The term SMART goals is an acronym that most people may already be familiar with, but just in case you haven't encountered it, SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So in other words, you're going to say exactly what it is you're doing. You're not going to say, we're going to rescue a lot of cats, or we're going to make sure that animals get adopted and have homes. You're going to be really specific about that. You're going to say that in a year's time, we are going to rescue, 236 cats. Based on historical data, we know that that's what we did last year. We believe that's what we're going to do again this year. That we're going to complete 180 adoptions, and we're going to have a return rate that is lower than X percent, that kind of thing. The more specific you can be, the better. And then you're going to talk about how you're going to collect that data. So the only way that you're going to know whether or not you've achieved your goals is to collect the data as you go along. You can't wait until you've got a grant for a year and then come up with the data after the fact. So you're collecting all along. You have an efficient way to track that. This may sound familiar. I said it before, and I'll say it again because it's important. You want to know how many intakes you have, the age and sex of the animals that you're taking in, what their medical conditions are, obviously vaccination records, spay-neuter surgeries, how many adoptions, how many other outcomes you have. Really be diligent about collecting the data. You need it, and you know on a daily basis that you need it, but it's also required by many funders so that you can report on your outcomes. It's also a way to look at your own program efficiency, right? So if you see numbers that are increasing or decreasing and there are trends forming, then it gives you the opportunity to take a look and say, what are we doing right here? This is great. Or where do we need to improve? Or how can we address this sudden uptick in surrenders or returns or whatever it may be? The way you know about those trends is that you're collecting your data as you go along. Sometimes a funder will also ask you about sustainability. How will you continue your program after the grant period ends? And just a hint, the correct answer isn't, we're just gonna come after you next year for another grant. That may be true, and you may very well want to approach them annually for a grant, but what they really are asking is, how sustainable is your organization? How much solid ground are you standing on? And so you want to talk about what your plans are. That include fundraising, donations, collecting revenue from your adoptions, pursuing funding from other sources. Be as specific as you can about, yes, we need your money, but we also have other sources of revenue, and we are on solid enough ground that we're going to continue. And if you want to give us another grant again next year, that'd be great. And so, of course, you need to submit a budget and a budget narrative for your grant proposal. Funders want to know exactly how you're spending the money. Like I said before, general operating expenses is a great option to have, and if you find a funder that gives you that, wonderful. Usually, though, they're going to say, we will support your spay-neuter program. We will support your adoption program. We will support your foster training program. And you're going to need to provide a detailed program budget to show them what the expenses are for running the program. You know, again, supplies, mileage, food, litter, whatever it may be, and what your sources of revenue are. So how much are you bringing in into donations? What are your adoption fees? That kind of thing. Sometimes they give you a budget narrative section as well, and that's where you can say verbally what is represented by those numbers. And sometimes you don't have that opportunity. So you want to make sure your budget is as detailed as possible. A lot of times it's said within the grants world that your budget should tell the whole story of your grant proposal in number form. So somebody should be able to look at your budget first before they read any of what you've said and be able to get a pretty good picture of what you plan on doing. So next I'm just going to kind of cover some helpful hints. These are kind of just generally speaking some things that might be beneficial when you sit down to write a grant proposal. So the first one I would say is to use their language. So look at their mission and their areas of focus and what kinds of keywords they repeat on their website or in their communications, and as much as possible, try to reflect that language to the extent that you can do it authentically. I mean, don't, quote it word for word in every paragraph, but if you can kind of narrow in on what their focus is, their words will tell you a lot about what they value and how they look at the world of animal welfare specifically. So reflect that as much as you can. I recommend writing an active voice as opposed to passive voice, which seems like a small detail, but the more action words you can use, the more assertive and powerful you can come across. So say, rather than saying 100 cats will be fixed, we will spay or neuter 100 cats. So, or instead of saying 75 adoptions will be completed in the year, you say, we will facilitate 75 adoptions. It's a subtle difference, but it matters. Be sure you follow the application instructions exactly. Funders can be really particular about things sometimes, and if you don't follow the rules, if you exceed the page limit, or if you don't submit all of the things that they've asked for as attachments, you won't get consideration. Speaking of that, gather all the supporting documents ahead of time, because again, you want to have them all in hand. Sometimes if it's an online application, you can save it and come back to it, and sometimes you have to do it all in one sitting and you don't have that option. So be sure you have everything at your fingertips ahead of time before you sit down to do it. Proofread, because again, you want to represent your organization the best you can. You want to put your best foot forward, so be sure that you don't have a bunch of typos or sentences that just end in the middle of a thought, that kind of thing. Be sure you look it all over and that it's polished. Have somebody else read it is always a good policy. Where I work, we read each other's drafts all the time and give feedback so that we know at least two sets of eyes have looked at it to catch any errors that might have been in there. And then submit early, because glitches happen. Technology's great until it's not. And so if you're online and you're submitting an application, you want to give yourself enough of a cushion that you're not right down to, if it's due at midnight, you're not there at 11:59 p.m. and then suddenly realize that your computer decided to do a software update or something silly like that. So be sure you allow yourself plenty of time. So hopefully you got the grant. We just fast forward. You got the money. So what do you do now? First, thank the funder. So I encourage you to write a thank you letter and to tell them, specifically how grateful you are and reiterate what you intend to do with their money. Find out what the reporting requirements will be and what those deadlines are so that you can turn in your grant reporting on time. And make a plan now. Here's the same point I told you I was going to hammer home. Make a plan now for collecting the information that you're going to need. Don't wait until, the report's due next month, I guess I better gather that data. Just do yourself a favor, and if you said what data you were going to track as outcomes, then start day one with collecting that data right off the bat. If the funder doesn't have reporting requirements, I encourage you to send them a brief update anyway. It doesn't have to be detailed, but just let them know, hey, as a result of your generous funding, this is what we were able to accomplish this year. Because you're paving the way then for a partnership that may last beyond that one grant. And so you're creating perhaps a funding stream that can last. So just some final thoughts here. I thought I was clever when I came up with this. So create, collaborate, count, and collect. So create is, I would encourage you to just proactively create a grants file and gather things together ahead of time, even if you don't have a specific opportunity on your radar. So just create some language about your organizational history, your mission statement, your current stats on things and data that you're collecting, and whatever those supporting documents are, have those in a file and have them ready so that when you see an opportunity, you can respond quickly. The point about collaboration, I just want to remind us that we're all in this together. And so the more you can collaborate with other rescues in your area, if you have rescues that specialize in different things than you, and you can share referrals back and forth, or hey, we're full up, do you have any room? Or hey, we don't have any fosters available right now because they're on vacation. Can we divert these animals to you? We'll do the same for you. And collaborating when you submit a grant proposal. If you can demonstrate that you have partnerships and good relationships with other rescues in the organization, what you're saying to the funder is you're going to get more bang for your buck because we've got a coordinated effort going on here, that we're not in our little silos, we're working together to solve this. Count is, again, have a good accounting system, have a way of tracking your expenses as you go. And I know sometimes with small rescues, it's a little more challenging. You don't have the capacity to do super detailed accounting, but just at least be sure you're tracking things and you have categories for your spending and categories for your revenue. And then collect a solid plan for data collection. Have I mentioned data collection? But be sure you have that in place. I have no idea what time it is.
You have about 5 minutes
Okay,
before
no,
you.
I'm actually,
Yeah, you're at the
That's
end.
me.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'm done.
So then you have,
So we do have time for questions.
you have 10 minutes for questions.
Okay. I don't know if I got 10 minutes worth of answers, but we'll see what happens. Hi, Meg.
Hi, two questions. How do you feel about use of AI for writing grant applications and for newbies that are tracking and collecting their data? Do you recommend, is there a software out there that helps, or has anybody found an Excel template from an Excel nerd that is shareable?
Okay, so Meg asked two questions for anybody that couldn't hear. The first one was about AI, the use of AI in proposal writing, and the second one was about software or methods of data collection. Okay. The AI question is a great one and a timely one because that's a really hot topic right now. I love AI. I don't use it to, quote, write a proposal. That's what I'm for. I think AI is a great tool. It's a great assistant. It doesn't replace humans in any realm, and in grant writing, it's no exception. I think if you write something and then put it in AI and say, proofread this for me, or if you say, edit this down so that it fits a 500 word count limit, or if you say, polish this up and make it sound more professional, yeah, sure. It's great for that. It's great for that. Or show me examples of a statement of need about animal overpopulation. Show me examples of, if you're looking for data, I have found myself doing that more and more instead of like Googling, because then you have to like, just kind of comb through the results. I often use ChatGPT to like steer me towards data sources, right? So if you're looking for community level data about whatever, start there, and then and say, the prompt matters, so you can say something along the lines of, act as a grant writer and show me data about, shelter overcrowding in Marion County. Whatever comes up, and you can say too, cite your sources. And then go to those sources and check it out and see which one to use. Those are the ways I've used AI. Or give me a synonym for such and such, that kind of thing. I'm a big fan of AI. It does not replace humans with brains. Yeah. To your second question about data collection, I will defer to other people in this room because I don't directly work with a rescue or shelter anymore, but I know Shelter Love is one software, and I think the way that you pay for Shelter Love is like a portion of your adoption fees, like a couple of dollars from every adoption they collect. It has a pretty robust data collection system. I'm sure there are other ones out there. Does anyone else want to chime in and recommend something to them? Yeah.
I use PetPoint.
PetPoint.
PetPoint is a really great data collection. We use it for all of our intakes to track medical, vaccinations, anything and everything, as well as intake dates and adoption dates or transfer dates.
What was that called?
PetPoint.
PetPoint. And she said it's also very robust for collecting data.
Is it a paid service?
I believe it is, yes.
We use PetPoint. It's free to us, but we have to use a 24 Pet Watch microchip. So we do have to buy the microchips, but the software is free.
Okay.
I love that.
So I know one of your slides said about including an impactful story. A lot of applications have a word limit. So is it more important to add an impactful story and risk not having some of the other important info you went in there? Would that be more important, the story, or other important information, would you say?
That's always a balancing act, for sure. Her question was about including an impactful story versus struggling against a word limit. That's always the balancing act. And this might be a good example of how to use AI, because I actually just did this pretty recently. I had a success story I wanted to, this is in the human service world, not pets, but I had a success story that a client had given me that they wanted included in the proposal. It was a great story, but it was really long. And I think it was like a 300 or 500 word count question. So I edited on my own to the point that I had gone as far as I could go, and then I said, ChatGPT, help me out here, condense this down. It's great at doing that. I think that you want to, generally I start like kind of at a high level and get more specific. So statement of need, this is what our community is facing. This is the problem that we're trying to solve. This is what's going on. And here's an example. Or, if when you want to talk about outcomes, that might be a place to put a success story about, oh, we had this animal and it was in terrible shape and we did all these things and it got adopted and it's happy and healthy today. It's a nice touch when you can do it, if it fits, but that is always the struggle. And I think the hard data and the bigger picture is the most important, and the story is trying to tug the heartstrings and draw them in. Talk loud, because they're applauding next door. That person must have done a really good job.
When you were talking about different places to find the grant, you said something about Grant Gopher, and there was another G word in there, and I missed that one.
Grant Watch is the other one.
Thank you.
there's a level of those that's free, and then there's a paid subscription that is a little more enhanced and has more features, but those are the free versions of those, yeah. But like I said before, your best resource that you already have is Pet Friendly has, and I think it's an Excel spreadsheet, but it's a list of names of foundations, and it's a great starting point. Anybody else? Okay.